She saved 7 lives in 1 hour. Then the FBI walked into the trauma bay and asked why Claire Ransom was listed as dead. At Mercy Ridge Trauma Center in Denver, the morning began like any other. Sleet tapped the windows. Nurses moved between coffee cups ringing phones and families praying behind plastic curtains. Then the interstate bled into the ER. 7 critical patients arrived at once, and every monitor started screaming. One rookie nurse stepped forward with hands too steady for someone new. She saw what doctors missed, heard what machines had not caught yet, and made choices no textbook could explain. But this is not just a hospital rescue story. It is about survival, buried truth, and the cost of saving lives when your past was meant to stay dead. Watch closely. Like this video, comment where you're watching from, and don't blink when the badges appear. Before the badges. Before the federal file. Before 7 green lines turned a hospital hallway into a question no one knew how to answer. Claire. Ransom walked into Mercy Ridge Trauma Center with sleet melting on the shoulders of her coat and a silence around her that did not belong to a rookie. Denver was gray that morning. The kind of gray that pressed low against the city and made the mountains look like a rumor behind the clouds. Sleet ticked against the glass doors of the ambulance entrance, small and sharp, like fingernails tapping from the other side. Cars crawled past the hospital in wet lines. Their headlights smeared across the pavement, pale and tired in the early light. Inside Mercy Ridge, the day was trying to pretend it was ordinary. The lobby smelled like coffee floor polish and damp wool from the coats of people who had come in too early and stayed too long. A toddler cried near registration while his mother bounced him against her hip and filled out forms with one hand. An old man slept in a wheelchair with a blanket over his knees. A woman in business clothes stood by the vending machines whispering into her phone that she did not know anything yet, that yes, she would call when the doctor came back. Claire passed all of it without slowing. Her backpack hung from one shoulder. Her hair was tied back in a plain knot at the base of her neck. Her scrubs were folded inside the bag, clean and blue, smelling faintly of detergent. Her badge clipped to her coat pocket still looked new, the plastic clear, the edges unscuffed. Claire Ransom, Registered Nurse Residency Program. The last line always felt louder than the rest. It told people how to see her before she opened her mouth. New. Learning. Supervised. Safe, as long as she stayed inside the lines. Claire had learned a long time ago that lines were useful until someone started bleeding on the wrong side of them. She reached the staff entrance and stopped just before the card reader. Not for long. Only enough to let her eyes move across the reflection in the dark glass. Behind her, the lobby shifted in pieces. Security guard at the front desk looking down at his phone. Woman in the business suit still crying without sound. Elevator doors opening on the far wall. A man in a black winter coat stepping out, pausing to shake sleet from his sleeve. Nothing wrong. Not yet. Claire scanned the camera above the entrance. The emergency exit sign, the fire extinguisher case, the curved mirror angled towards the hallway. Her gaze passed over each detail with no visible urgency, but with the accuracy of someone who had once been punished by surprise. Then she tapped her badge to the reader. The door clicked open. The staff corridor swallowed the lobby noise. Here, the hospital sounded different. Rubber soles whispered over tile. Elevator chimes rose and fell. Somewhere beyond the walls, a cart rattled over a threshold with a loose wheel that needed replacing. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead. Claire walked past the break room where the morning shift had formed its usual small circle around bad coffee and exhaustion. A respiratory therapist named June looked up from stirring powdered creamer into a paper cup. "Morning, Claire," said. Her voice was even. Not cold, not warm. Just placed carefully like a cup set down near the edge of a table. June smiled. "You want coffee before the floor eats us alive." Claire glanced at the coffee pot. It was too dark, burned at the bottom, the smell bitter enough to coat the back of her throat. "No, thank you. You sure it's almost drinkable today?" Claire's mouth moved as if it considered a smile and decided against it. "I'm sure. She kept walking. The locker room was empty, except for the buzz of a wall vent and the metallic click of a pipe somewhere behind the ceiling. Claire changed quickly. Coat off, scrubs on, shoes tied tight, badge clipped to the left side of her chest, then tugged twice to test the hold. She rolled her sleeves down, then back up once, stopping just below the elbow. A pale scar ran along the inside of her left forearm. Clean old narrow. The kind of scar that had healed well because someone had known exactly what they were doing, or because there had not been enough time to do anything else. Claire looked at it for half a second. Then she shut the locker. Out on the emergency floor, Mercy Ridge had found its morning rhythm. It was not calm, but it was controlled. Phones rang. Doors opened. Voices moved from room to room. The waiting area held the usual mix of pain and impatience, the man with chest pressure who kept insisting it was probably nothing, the college student with a swollen ankle, the construction worker holding a towel around 2 fingers and trying not to look at the blood. At the center of it all stood Beth Rowe. Beth did not need to raise her voice to run the floor. She had been a charge nurse for 22 years, and every one of those years had put something sharp into her eyes. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it looked like a decision. She held a clipboard in one hand and a phone in the other, listening to someone upstairs explain why there were no beds available. "No," Beth said into the phone. "You do not get to call this a flow issue when my hallway is full and your unit is holding 2 discharges because lunch trays have not arrived." She listened. Her expression did not change, but the air around her cooled. "Then come downstairs and tell the family yourself." She ended the call and turned before Claire reached the desk. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep." Beth looked her over. Not suspicious exactly. More like a mechanic listening to an engine with one sound out of place. "You're on monitors, lines, and documentation today. Trauma support only." "Yes, ma'am." Beth narrowed her eyes. "No hero work." Claire did not blink. "I understand." "No, you heard me. There's a difference." Claire held her gaze. "I understand." Beth waited as if expecting the younger woman to add something to defend herself, to charm or flinch. Claire gave her nothing. Beth lowered the clipboard. "Ransom." Claire paused. "When people panic, they grab for control. They start making calls that are not theirs. That is how patients die and licenses disappear." Claire's face stayed still. "I do not grab." Beth did not like that answer. Claire could tell by the way her jaw shifted. "What do you do?" Claire looked past the nurse station toward the trauma bay doors. "I hold what needs holding." For a moment, Beth said nothing. Then she pointed with the clipboard. "Trauma. 2 needs a room check. Do it by the sheet, not by instinct." Claire nodded and walked away. Trauma 2 was empty when she entered. Empty rooms in emergency departments were never peaceful. They were waiting. The bed sat centered under the light sheet, pulled tight rails raised. The monitor screen was dark. The supply drawers were closed, each one labeled in black print. The crash cart stood against the wall with its red seal intact. Claire stood in the doorway for one breath. She listened. A good room had a sound. Oxygen line secure. Suction quiet. Monitor on standby. Wheels locked. Nothing loose. Nothing missing. Nothing that would cost a second when seconds came with teeth. She stepped in and began. The seal on the crash cart cracked under her fingers. She opened each drawer and checked the contents. Not casually, not the way people checked because a policy required a signature. She counted syringes, checked expiration dates, pressed the laryngoscope light on-off on again, tested the bag valve mask, feeling the resistance against her palm, followed the oxygen tubing to the wall connection and tugged once. Locked. She opened the airway drawer, then the chest tube kit drawer. Her fingers stopped on each package just long enough to confirm what her eyes had already seen. When she reached the suction, she turned it on. The machine woke with a low pull of air. She adjusted it, listened, then turned it off. A voice behind her said, "You always do that." Claire did not turn right away. Dr. Owen Klein leaned against the doorframe with a tablet under one arm and a protein bar in his hand. He was a surgical resident in the part of training where the coat was still too clean, and every answer felt like something that could save or ruin him. He had kind eyes when he was not trying to hide them behind ambition. Do what Claire asked. Check a room like it's about to betray you. She squeezed the bag valve mask once more and set it down. Rooms do not betray people. Owen took a bite of the protein bar. That's good to know. People trust them too much. He stopped chewing for a beat. Then he gave a small laugh, uncertain whether she had meant it as humor. You were military or something. Claire closed the drawer. No. The answer came too quickly, but her face did not. Owen noticed. He was young, not blind. Sorry, he said. You just have that vibe. Claire looked at him now. What vibe? He shrugged, trying to make it light. Like you know where the exits are. Claire's eyes moved once to the reflection in the stainless steel cabinet behind him. I do. Owen's smile faded a little. Before he could answer, heavy steps approached the bay. Dr. Graham Ellis entered without wasting motion. He was in his early 40s, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, with a face that looked carved by long nights and bad outcomes. His white coat was open over dark scrubs. A stethoscope hung around his neck. He carried no extra warmth into a room, but he carried steadiness, and in trauma that was worth more. Owen, he said. Dr. Ellis. Ellis's gaze moved to Claire, then to the open crash cart, then to the suction canister. Problem. No doctor. Then why is the room open? Check before shift. Ellis stepped closer. Beth assigns you to this. Yes. Beth tell you to break the seal. Claire met his eyes. No. Owen glanced between them suddenly, very interested in the floor. Ellis waited. Claire did not fill the silence with excuses. Finally, she said, if I need the card, I need to know what is in it. Not what the checklist says is in it. Ellis studied her hands. They rested near the counter, relaxed but ready. No tremor, no nervous tapping, no need to prove anything. First-year residency nurse, he said. Yes. You always this sure? Claire looked at the cart, then back at him. Number. That answer interested him more than the others. When are you sure? When the patient tells me. Owen gave a quiet snort. Patients lie. Claire's eyes stayed on Ellis. Bodies do not. Ellis held her stare for a long second. Something unreadable moved behind his eyes. Not trust yet, but attention. Support keeps people alive, he said. Do not let anyone make you think otherwise. Claire nodded. I do not. Beth appeared in the doorway, as if summoned by the smell of rule bending. Doctor, your 8:40 consult is waiting. Ellis gave Claire one last look. Put the room back ready. It is ready, Claire said. Beth's eyes sharpened. Ellis almost smiled. Almost. Then keep it that way. He walked out with Owen trailing after him, still watching Claire over his shoulder. Beth stayed. The room felt smaller with her in it. You opened my crash cart. Yes. I told you by the sheet. The sheet said sealed. It was sealed. And now I know it is stocked. Beth stepped closer, her voice low enough that it would not carry into the hall. You are not here to make the floor fit the way you think the world works. Claire's gaze did not move. No, ma'am. Then stop acting like you know what is coming. Claire looked toward the ambulance doors at the end of the hall. The glass was fogged at the edges from the cold outside. Beyond it, red light flashed once, then vanished, only a reflection from a passing vehicle. I do not know what is coming. Beth looked unconvinced. Claire added, I know what it sounds like before it arrives. Beth's mouth tightened. That right. Claire did not answer. A shout came from exam 4. The construction worker had looked at his fingers and nearly passed out. Beth turned toward the sound already moving. Close the cart, she said over her shoulder. And ransom. Yes, do not get spooky on my floor. Claire closed the crash cart and replaced the seal. The morning continued. For a while, it stayed ordinary enough to fool people who needed ordinary. Claire started an IV on the man with the chest pressure while he told her 3 times that it was probably heartburn. She nodded, taped the line cleanly, and asked if the pain moved to his jaw. He stopped joking after that. She helped a resident clean glass from the college student's elbow. She spoke softly to a child afraid of stitches. She guided a confused elderly woman back onto the bed before the woman could fall, then adjusted the blanket over her knees with the same care she used checking oxygen lines. She did not rush. She did not linger. Everything about her seemed measured but not slow. Beth watched her from the station more than once. Claire could feel it without turning. At 8:58, the ambulance radio crackled. Nothing unusual. A possible stroke coming in from Lakewood. A diabetic emergency 5 minutes out. A fall at a nursing home. Mercy Ridge took the calls, assigned rooms, shifted staff. The floor breathed around the information. At 9:03, that breath changed. Claire was at the supply cabinet restocking pressure bags when she heard it. Not one sound, a pattern. The radio went quiet for 6 seconds too long. A clerk at the desk stopped typing and looked toward Beth. The security guard near the ambulance entrance straightened, listening to something in his earpiece. A paramedic outside the glass doors ran instead of walked. Claire's hand paused on a wrapped pressure bag. The air had changed weight. June, the respiratory therapist, came into the supply room looking for tubing. "Hey, you seen the pediatric masks?" Claire reached to the second shelf without looking and handed them over. June blinked. "Thanks, you okay?" Claire listened again. The floor beyond the doorway had lost its casual noise. Not silence. Focus. The kind that gathers before a storm breaks. "No," Claire said. June stared. "No, you are not okay." Claire turned toward her. "No, we are not." June's smile vanished. Beth entered the supply room a moment later, phone in hand. "Ransom, why are you standing in here like you heard a ghost?" Claire lifted 3 pressure bags from the shelf and tucked them against her chest. The radios changed. Beth looked toward the hallway. "What does that mean?" "It means dispatch is sorting before they speak." Beth's eyes narrowed. "You work dispatch?" "No, EMS." "No?" Beth stepped closer. "Then where did you learn to hear that?" Claire looked at her. For a moment, something almost surfaced. Sand under boots. Static in an earpiece. A man coughing blood into a torn glove. Someone shouting for a litter that never came. Then the hospital returned. Fluorescent lights. Plastic shelves. Beth Rowe waiting with suspicion in her eyes. Places where quiet came before bad news, Claire said. Beth absorbed that. Her face did not soften, but her voice changed by a fraction. "What places?" Claire moved past her with the pressure bags. "Small ones." Beth followed her into the hall. "You keep saying that." Claire did not stop. "Because it is true. Small places do not teach a nurse to look at a hallway like she is planning an evacuation." Claire turned at the corner. "They teach you to count what you have before you need more." Beth stepped into her path. "Listen to me. Mercy Ridge is not a field tent. It is not some rural clinic with 3 nurses and a prayer. We have chain of command here. We have policy. We have people whose job is to make the call." Claire's eyes moved over Beth's shoulder. Security had left the ambulance entrance. That was wrong. Beth snapped her fingers once, bringing Claire's attention back. "Are you hearing me?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then say it back." Claire looked at her now. "I stay in my role." Beth nodded once. "Good." Claire continued. "Unless the role ends before the patient does." Beth's expression hardened. "No." Claire's voice stayed calm. Chains break. "Not on my floor. They do everywhere." Beth moved closer. "You freelance in my trauma bay, you endanger patients, staff licenses, and this entire hospital." Claire held the pressure bags against her chest like armor. "Patients are already endangered." Beth stared at her. For a second, neither woman spoke. Then the overhead speaker crackled. Both of them turned. The voice that came through was clipped, strained, and stripped of everything except urgency. "Mercy Ridge be advised. Multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 25 southbound near Spear Boulevard. Multiple critical injuries. 7 confirmed inbound. Possible additional patients. First units arriving in 5 minutes." The hallway stopped. Not completely. Hospitals never stop completely. But the ordinary sounds fell away so fast it felt like someone had opened a door and let the air out. Beth moved first. Her voice cut across the floor. "Trauma 1, 2, and 3 open." Blood bank on standby. Respiratory to trauma. Owen, find Ellis. June airway carts. Claire monitors and lines. Support only. Claire was already walking toward trauma 2. Yes, ma'am. Beth watched her go. Claire set the pressure bags on the counter, pulled gloves from the box and slid her hands into them one finger at a time. Outside, the first siren rose through the sleet. Then another. Then enough of them to make the glass tremble. The first siren arrived as a thin sound behind the glass, high and distant, almost swallowed by the sleet. Then it grew teeth. By the time the ambulance turned into the bay, every person on the emergency floor had changed shape. Shoulders squared, voices shortened. Hands found gloves, tape, tubing, scissors. The waiting room still held its quiet fears, but behind the trauma doors the hospital had become a machine bracing for impact. Claire stood at the edge of trauma 2 with her gloves on, palms open, eyes still. Beth Rose strode past the nurse's station, her clipboard gone, now her phone pressed between her shoulder and ear. Blood bank confirms 4 units ready, she called. More on request. Respiratory is coming. CT says they can take 1 in 10 minutes. Dr. Owen Klein jogged in from the physician workroom tablet, clutched in one hand, face already bright with adrenaline. Where's Ellis? On his way down, Beth said. He was upstairs with vascular. Owen looked toward the ambulance doors as red light flashed through the frosted glass. 7 confirmed. Beth did not look at him, at least. The first ambulance backed in hard. Tires hissed across wet concrete. The rear doors flew open before the vehicle had fully settled. 2 paramedics jumped down with a stretcher between them, boots splashing through slush and oil sheen. The patient on the stretcher was a man in his 30s. His shirt had been cut open. Rainwater and blood darkened the sheet beneath him. His face had the flat gray color of someone running out of air in a room full of it. Male 34, the lead paramedic shouted as the stretcher crossed the threshold. Driver, steering wheel impact, left chest trauma. Breath sounds diminished. Pressure dropping. He's been fighting us the whole ride. The man's eyes were open wide. Not alert, animal-wide. His mouth moved in silent panic, lips blue at the edges. Beth pointed. Trauma 1. Dr. Ellis appeared at the same moment, coming fast down the corridor, white coat, open sleeves, already pushed up. Talk to me. The paramedic repeated the report as they locked the stretcher beside the bed. Nurses moved in. Scissors cut away what remained of clothing. Monitor leads snapped into place. The screen woke and began to complain. Heart rate high. Oxygen falling. Blood pressure too low. Owen stepped beside Ellis, trying to make his voice sound steady. Portable chest, then CT if he holds. Claire had moved to the foot of the bed without being told. She watched the man's chest rise unevenly. The right side lifted. The left barely moved. His neck muscles strained with each breath. His eyes rolled toward the ceiling, searching for air that would not enter. Claire set one hand on his shin, grounding him through the chaos. Look at me, she said. His gaze snapped to her. Stay with the sound of my voice. He tried to breathe and made a wet, trapped noise. Claire looked at Ellis. He is trapping air. Owen frowned. We need imaging to confirm. Claire did not turn to him. He does not have time for proof. Ellis placed his stethoscope to the man's chest first, right then left. His jaw tightened. Needle decompression. Owen reached for the kit from the tray too fast, fingers catching on the packaging. Claire was already beside him. Second, intercostal. Midclavicular. Feel before you commit. Owen glanced at her, irritated. I know. His hand shook just enough to make the lie visible. Claire placed 2 fingers near the site, not taking over, just correcting the angle. Here. Owen inserted the needle. For a half-second, nothing happened. Then a hiss cut through the room. It was a small sound, almost delicate, but everyone heard it. The man's chest lifted more evenly. His oxygen crept up by 3 points, then 5. His eyes stayed locked on Claire, still terrified, but no longer drowning as quickly. Ellis looked at Owen. Good chest tube kit. Then his eyes flicked to Claire. She had already opened it. Beth saw that from the doorway. Her mouth tightened, but another siren pulled her attention away. The second stretcher entered so fast the wheels skidded on the wet tile. A young woman lay under a foil blanket, her dark hair tangled with glass dust. She was not screaming. That was the worst part. Her eyes were half open, unfocused, as if the room had become too far away to care about. Female, late 20s, the paramedic called. Passenger, abdominal trauma, hypotensive in the field, could not get a stable pressure, possible splenic injury. She faded twice. Beth pointed toward trauma 2. Claire moved before anyone spoke her name. The woman's skin was cool under Claire's fingers. Her wrist pulse was thin and fast, a thread about to snap. Claire pressed gently at the abdomen. Rigid, guarded, wrong. The woman's lips moved. Claire leaned close. "Tell me your name." A breath came out. "Emily. Emily." "I'm Claire. You are at Mercy Ridge. I need you to keep your eyes open." Emily's gaze fluttered. "My brother. We will find him." It was not a promise that he was alive. Claire did not make those. It was a task. Tasks were safer than hope. The monitor searched for a pressure and failed. Owen looked over from trauma 1. "Try another cuff size." Claire looked at Beth. "She needs blood now." "O negative, warmed." Beth stepped into the room. "Who told you to call that?" Claire's fingers remained on Emily's pulse. Her body did. Beth stared at her. Claire's voice dropped quieter and heavier. "If we wait for the machine to agree, she dies." Beth looked at the screen, then at Emily's face. The argument lasted less than a second, but it cost Beth something. She grabbed the phone from the wall. "Blood bank, activate massive transfusion for trauma 2. O negative, warmed, immediate release." Owen heard and turned sharply. "We need physician authorization." Ellis called from trauma 1 without looking up from the chest tube tray. "You have it. Move." Blood became the only color in the room. A nurse hung the first unit. The warmer hummed. A pressure bag inflated around the plastic like a hand closing around time. Claire watched the line fill dark red, moving toward Emily's vein. Emily's eyes rolled again. Claire touched her cheek. "Stay here." The young woman dragged in a shallow breath. "I'm cold." "I know." Claire pulled another warm blanket over her shoulders, but her eyes stayed on the monitor, waiting for the pressure to stop falling. It did not rise yet. It only paused. For now, a pause was life. Then the third stretcher arrived with compressions already underway. The paramedic straddled the lower rail, pumping hard against the patient's chest as the stretcher rolled in. The man beneath him was broad, older, with gray in his beard and blood matted along his scalp. His head rocked with each compression. His mouth hung open around an airway tube. The monitor beside him showed a flat line that seemed too calm for the violence around it. "Male 50s, the paramedic shouted. "Rear seat passenger, lost pulses 2 minutes out. CPR started in the rig. 1 EPI given. No shock advised en route." Beth's voice cracked across the bay. "Trauma 3, code team now." A nurse reached for the defibrillator pads, but her hands fumbled at the wrapper. Claire crossed the room and took the pads, tearing them open cleanly. Beth saw her. Ransom. Claire placed the first pad, then the second. "He is already dead if we do nothing. That is not your call." Claire looked at the monitor. Flat. Then at the man's chest. Then at the skin around his mouth. "Charge." The room hesitated. Claire's voice sharpened. "Charge." The defibrillator began to rise in pitch. Owen appeared at the doorway, flushed and angry. He was a systole in the field. "We need rhythm confirmation." Claire glanced at the monitor as compressions paused. A narrow flicker crossed the line, then vanished. "There." Owen stared. "I barely saw that." But it was there. Ellis called from trauma 1. "If there is a shockable rhythm shock." Beth swallowed whatever she had been about to say. Claire raised her voice. Clear. Hands lifted from the bed. The shock hit. The man's body jumped once, then fell heavy again. Nothing. "Compressions," Claire said. The nurse climbed onto the stool and started pressing. Too fast. Claire touched her wrist. Deeper, slower. Let the chest come back. The nurse adjusted. Someone pushed medication. Someone called the time. The overhead lights made everything look too white, too exposed. The man's face did not change. Owen stood at the foot of the bed, eyes moving between the monitor and Claire. You cannot will a pulse back? Claire did not look at him. No, but I can refuse to leave early. Second rhythm check. A jagged line. Charge, Claire said. This time no one hesitated. Clear. The shock hit. The monitor stayed flat. 1 beat. 2. Then a small complex appeared thin as a scratch. Another followed. A nurse whispered pulse. Claire pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck. There it was. Weak. Unsteady, insulted by death, but present. Keep him warm, she said. Fluids through the warmer. Do not let him drift. Beth stepped close enough that only Claire could hear. You are walking a very thin line. Claire looked at the man on the bed, then back at Beth. He is walking a thinner one. Beth's eyes flashed, but before she could answer, the ambulance bay doors slammed open again. 2 stretchers entered together. The hallway narrowed around them. The first carried a man with blood running from his ear and shallow breaths that rattled in his throat. The second carried a teenage boy whose face was streaked with tears, sleet, and road grime. His hands clawed at the blanket as if he were trying to pull himself out of his own body. The paramedics shouted over each other. Male 40s. Head trauma, chest trauma, pupils unequal. He is desadding. Teen male, pelvic crush injury, unstable pressure, possible internal bleed. He keeps trying to sit up. Beth's command came fast. Head trauma to 4, teen to 2 overflow. Keep them in the bay. Nobody goes to hallway unless they can survive it. Owen rubbed both hands over his face. We do not have 4 ready. Then make it ready, Beth snapped. Claire turned back to Emily. Her pressure had crept up, not enough, but enough to hand her to another nurse. Stay with her, Claire said. Watch the pressure, not the silence. The nurse nodded, too overwhelmed to ask what that meant. Claire moved to the teen. He was 17, maybe younger. Tall, but still shaped like a boy, all elbows and fear. His hoodie had been cut away, leaving a high school basketball shirt beneath. The letters were smeared with blood. His lips trembled. I can't breathe, he gasped. Claire leaned over him, blocking the ceiling lights from his view. You can. You're doing it right now. His eyes caught hers. Am I going to die? The room seemed to quiet around the question. Claire did not soften it into a lie. Not while you are listening to me. His breath hitched. What's your name? Liam. Liam, I need you flat. If you sit up, you make the bleeding worse. I can't feel my legs. I know. His eyes widened. Claire held his wrist, feeling the pulse race beneath her fingertips. Stay with my hand. That is your job. Owen stepped to the bedside, trying to reclaim the room. Pelvic X-ray, then CT. We need to locate the bleed. Claire looked at Liam's legs. The angle. The bruising. The way his body tried to protect the lower abdomen. His skin was mottled now, color breaking into islands. Binder first. Owen shook his head. We need imaging. He is bleeding into the pelvis. You do not know that. Claire looked at him, then fully. He has cold, tachycardic, hypotensive, unstable pelvis legs externally rotated, and he is trying to die politely because he is 17 and scared. Put the binder on. Owen's face flushed. You are not the physician. Liam's hand tightened around Claire's wrist. Beth arrived with the binder in both hands. Put it on, she said. Owen turned to her stunned. Beth did not blink. Now, Owen positioned the binder too low. Claire's fingers came down over the edge. Higher. His jaw clenched. I have it. No, you are wrapping hips. You need to close the ring. The words cut through his pride because they were correct. Owen adjusted. He pulled tight. Liam cried out. Claire bent closer. Good. That pain means you are still here. Count with me. I can't. Yes, you can. 1. He squeezed his eyes shut. 1, 2, 2. His pressure dropped once more, then steadied at a number that still frightened everyone in the room, but no longer fell like a stone. Beth exhaled through her nose. Blood for the kid. A nurse ran. Across the bay, the head trauma patient began to cough against his own failing airway. Respiratory had finally arrived, pulling a cart behind her eyes wide as she took in the room. "Where do you need me?" "Everywhere," Beth said. Ellis was moving between Trauma 1 and 3, still managing the chest tube patient and the man who had coded. His gloves were red. His face was focused, but Claire saw the calculation behind his eyes. Too many patients. Too few hands. Too many decisions arriving at the same time. Owen saw it too and hated it. "We need another attending," he said. Beth's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and swore under her breath. "Second trauma surgeon is stuck north of Spear. I-25 is locked. Police are routing EMS through side streets." Ellis heard her. "How long?" "No estimate." That was worse than a number. The trauma bay absorbed the news in silence. Then Liam whispered Claire. She looked down. "I'm here. My mom does not know." Claire's throat tightened in a place she did not let touch her face. "She will. If I sleep." "You do not sleep unless I say." His eyes tried to close. Claire tapped his cheek, not hard, but enough. "Liam, look at me." He opened them. "That is it. Stay angry if you need to. Stay scared. Just stay." He nodded once barely. Owen watched her with a look that had changed from irritation to confusion. "You talk like you have done this before." Claire kept her fingers on Liam's pulse. "Everyone in trauma has done this before." "No, Owen." Owen said quietly, "Not like that." Before Claire could answer, Emily's monitor alarmed behind them. Her pressure was falling again. At the same time, the man in Trauma 3 lost his pulse. At the same time, the head trauma patient's oxygen saturation dropped into the 70s. 3 alarms rose together, each one demanding to be the only emergency in the room. Beth's voice cut through them. "Ellis." But Ellis was already at Trauma 3 hands, moving eyes hard. Owen looked from one patient to another, caught in the terrible arithmetic of a room with more dying than doctors. Claire stood very still for one breath. Not frozen. Choosing. Then she pointed to Owen. "Airway, patient. Now, slow bagging. Do not overventilate him." Owen snapped, "Do not order me." Claire was already moving toward Emily. "Then move before I have to." Beth turned on Claire, Ransom. Claire met her eyes across the bay. There was blood on Claire's sleeve now. Not hers. Not yet. Beth saw the monitors. Saw Ellis trapped in a code. Saw Owen halfway between anger and obedience. Saw Liam staring at Claire as if her voice were a rope. The charge nurse made the smallest nod. Not permission. Not forgiveness. A decision. Claire stepped to Emily's bed and pressed 2 fingers to her wrist. "Emily," she said, "open your eyes." Emily did not. The blood warmer hummed. The monitors screamed. Outside, another siren slid toward the ambulance bay through the sleet. Claire looked across the trauma room at Ellis. He looked back. For the first time that morning, he did not ask what she saw. He asked what she needed. Ransom. Claire's voice was clear. More blood. Pressure support ready. And nobody takes her to CT. Owen spun from the airway cart. "That is not your call." Claire looked at him over the noise. "If we move her now, we carry her to a machine and lose her in a hallway." Ellis held Claire's gaze for one fraction of a second. Then he turned to Beth. "She stays." Owen's mouth opened, but no sound came. The ER kept moving. The system had not broken. Not yet. But the cracks were showing, and Claire Ransom had her hands inside them, holding the morning together, while the interstate kept bleeding through the doors. The interstate kept bleeding through the doors, and Mercy Ridge had stopped feeling like a hospital. It had become a room full of clocks. Every monitor counted down in its own language. Every IV bag measured what little time could be bought. Every breath that came too shallow. Every pulse that weakened under a finger. Every blood pressure that failed to appear on the screen was another warning that the morning was running faster than the people inside it. Claire stood beside Emily Ward's bed and kept 2 fingers on the young woman's wrist. The pulse was there, but it felt offended by the idea of staying. "Second unit is up," the nurse said. Claire watched the blood move through the warmer. Pressure bag tighter. The nurse squeezed the bulb until the plastic sleeve hugged the blood bag hard. Emily's eyelids fluttered. Claire leaned closer. "Emily, stay with me." No answer. Across the bay, Dr. Ellis worked over Hank Decker, the man who had lost his pulse twice and seemed determined to test everyone's patience with death. A nurse pressed compressions into his chest while another called out the rhythm. Ellis stood at the bedside, face still, voice controlled. Pause. Hands lifted. The monitor flickered, then showed a rhythm too ugly to trust. Pulse check. A nurse reached for the carotid. Faint. "Then we keep him." Ellis looked toward Beth. "Warm fluids. Repeat labs. Do not let him cool." Beth was already moving. Owen Klein had taken position at the head trauma patient, Caleb Pierce. Respiratory stood beside him with the airway cart bagging carefully, but Caleb's oxygen kept sliding. His chest lifted unevenly. His throat made a wet sound that seemed to scrape its way out. Owen stared at the monitor. "He needs a tube." Claire looked up from Emily's bed. Controlled. Owen's eyes cut toward her. "I know." "Do you?" His face tightened. "I said I know." Caleb's pressure dropped again. Claire released Emily's wrist only after the nurse beside her took over exactly where her fingers had been. "Call it out if the pulse thins," Claire said. The nurse nodded. Claire crossed to Caleb Pierce. Owen lowered his voice. "You cannot keep stepping into every bed." Claire looked at the patient, not him. "Then stop leaving gaps." That landed harder than an insult because it was not meant as one. Respiratory glanced between them. "I need direction." Owen swallowed. His pride was still there, but fear had begun to cut through it. "Prepare to intubate." Claire watched Caleb's skin, the gray around the mouth, the sweat at the temples, the way his chest moved against the bagging. "Slow medication," she said. "Do not dump his pressure." Owen's jaw worked. "You are not anesthesia." "No," Claire said. "I am watching the part you are about to lose." Ellis heard her from the next bed. He did not look up right away. He finished taping a line handed off to Beth, then turned. "Controlled sequence," he said. Owen executes. Claire watches pressure and airway. Owen stared at him. "Doctor." Ellis's voice did not rise. No, the room obeyed because Ellis had made it official, but everyone knew whose words had shaped the order. Respiratory adjusted. Owen took the blade. Claire stood near Caleb's shoulder, close enough to see the pulse jump under the skin of his neck. The medication went in slowly. Too slowly for panic. Fast enough for survival. Caleb's jaw relaxed. His pressure trembled, dipped, then held. "Go," Claire said. Owen moved. The first attempt failed. Caleb's oxygen slipped. "Back out," Claire said. Owen froze for half a breath. "Back out," she repeated, calmer than the alarm. He did. Respiratory, bagged, slow, steady. Claire watched the chest rise. Again. Smaller angle. "You are lifting, not digging." Owen's hands adjusted. The tube passed. Breath sounds came on both sides. Oxygen climbed 1 point, then 2, then 5. Owen exhaled like he had been underwater. Claire did not give him relief. "Secure it. He is not saved. He is borrowed." Owen looked at her, and this time there was no anger ready on his face. Only confusion and something close to shame. A shout came from Trauma 2. Emily's pressure is falling again. Claire turned. Emily's body had gone pale in a deeper way, as if the color had not drained from her skin, but retreated from the room. The second unit was running. The warmer hummed. The monitor kept searching for a number and punishing everyone by failing. Ellis crossed to the bed with long, fast steps. "Abdomen," rigid Claire said. "Worse." Ellis pressed once and felt the same thing. His face changed by a degree. "She needs an operating room." Beth was already on the phone. "Ore is full. Ruptured aneurysm still open. Second room has no staff." Ellis's eyes hardened. "Find staff." Beth covered the phone with her palm. With what hands? No one had an answer. Emily's mouth opened. A sound came out small and broken. Claire bent close. Emily. I hear you. The young woman's eyes moved under her lids. Ellis looked toward the operating wing as if force of will could open a room through 2 walls and a locked elevator. We stabilize here. Beth stared at him. In the bay. We keep her alive until the room opens. That is not clean. No, Ellis said. It is what we have. Claire had already pulled a sterile tray closer. She did not touch the scalpel. She did not cross that line. But she opened suction-checked tubing, lifted the light, shifted the bed height, and made space at Ellis's right side before he asked. Beth saw it. So did Owen. Ellis looked at Claire. You know damage control. Claire's eyes stayed on Emily. I know bleeding. That was not an answer. It was enough. The next minutes shrank the world. There was no hospital. No storm. No waiting room. No federal file hiding somewhere in a database under a name the hospital thought it owned. There was only Emily Ward, the blood she was losing, and the people trying to convince her body to stay. Ellis worked with brutal precision. Claire managed suction and pressure. Beth called blood bank again, her voice sharp enough to cut wire. A nurse counted sponges. Another called out vitals. Pressure is still low. 3rd unit coming. Pulse weak. Keep warming. Owen stood near the foot of the bed watching Ellis and Claire move around each other with a rhythm that made no sense unless it had been learned somewhere. Pain did not wait for permission. At 9:43, Emily's pressure appeared on the monitor. Low, but real. Beth looked at it and closed her eyes for 1 second. Claire did not. Sophia, she said. Beth opened her eyes. What? Claire was already looking across the bay. Sophia Bell. The 6th patient had been brought in during the rush, a young woman with a head injury bruising along her temple and a silence that felt unstable. She had been waiting for CT under observation, her vitals ugly, but not yet catastrophic. Now her eyes shifted wrong. Claire saw it before the monitor cared. Sophia, she repeated. A nurse near the bed turned just as Sophia's body went rigid. Her back arched, her jaw clenched. The rails rattled. Seizure, the nurse shouted. Owen moved first, relieved to have a problem that matched a category. We need medication. Beth looked toward Ellis, who was still with Emily. Claire was already at Sophia's side, protecting her head, turning her safely, clearing space without forcing her body down. Do not hold her arms, Claire said. Protect the head, suction ready. Owen opened the medication drawer, then stopped. We need an order. Claire looked at Beth. Get Ellis. Beth raised her voice. Doctor. Ellis did not step away from Emily. His hands remained where they were needed. What? Sophia is seizing. Claire wants medication. Give it, Ellis said. Standard dose, now. Owen pulled the syringe. His fingers fumbled at the cap. Claire steadied his wrist, not gently, not harshly. Breathe once, then push. He did. The seizure continued for 3 more seconds that felt like a minute. Then Sophia's body released. Her breathing came ragged, then smoother. Claire checked her pupils. Unequal, but reactive. She looked toward the hallway. CT takes her when she can travel with airway support and a nurse who knows not to rush the corners. Owen stared. You saw it before she seized. Claire stripped off a glove and replaced it. Her eyes changed. I saw her eyes. No, Claire said. You looked at them. His face flushed, but he did not argue. At 9:49, Hank Decker lost his pulse again. The monitor in Trauma 3 flattened with a long sound that made the bay seem to inhale. A nurse whispered, not again. Claire turned from Sophia. Ellis was still locked on Emily. Beth was hanging blood. Owen was between Caleb's airway and Sophia's post-seizure state. Nobody had enough hands. Claire moved. By the time she reached Hank's bed, compressions had started, but the rhythm was messy. The nurse was tiring. The man's skin had gone waxy. Claire stepped onto the stool beside the bed. I have compressions. Beth looked up. Ransom. Claire's palms landed on Hank's chest. The rhythm changed. Not faster, better. The room heard it. The steady pressure, the release. the pace that did not beg the body but commanded it. Owen watched from Caleb's bedside, unable to look away. Claire counted under her breath. Not numbers. Words. Stay, stay, stay. Ellis looked over and saw her working. He saw Beth ready to object. He saw the rhythm on the monitor flicker. Let her work, he said. Beth's mouth closed. Medication went in. Respiratory gave breaths. Claire kept compressions until the pulse check. Pause. Hands lifted. The monitor showed a thin rhythm. A nurse checked. Pulse. Hank Decker had come back again. This time, nobody whispered Jesus. Nobody celebrated. The room had learned not to tempt the hour. Claire stepped down. Her arms burned. She flexed her hands once, then turned toward Liam. The teenager was still awake, but barely. His mother had not arrived yet, and that mattered in a way Claire did not want it to. Boys should not have to be brave without someone allowed to love them standing nearby. Liam's eyes found her. I counted, he whispered. Claire moved to his side. How far? 30. That is terrible counting. His lips twitched, almost a smile. Then pain folded across his face. My legs feel wrong. I know. I am scared. Claire looked at the binder, the bloodline, the monitor. Then she looked at him. Good. His eyes widened. Scared means you are still fighting. A tear slipped sideways into his hair. Claire wiped it with the corner of the sheet before anyone could see it, and turned the moment into something softer than he needed. Stay angry, she said. Stay scared. Stay here. At 9:56 Central Time called. They could take one patient. Beth looked at the board, then at Ellis. Sophia or Caleb. Ellis looked at Claire. Not because she outranked anyone. Because she had been right too many times to ignore. Claire looked from one bed to the other. Sophia's seizure had stopped, but her pupils worried her. Caleb's airway was secured, but his pressure still swung with every adjustment. Sophia, first Claire said. Airway ready, slow transport, no elevator crowding. Owen opened his mouth, then closed it. Beth noticed that too. Take Sophia, Beth said. June goes with her. 2 security clears Ahis head. The transport team began moving. Claire walked beside the head of the bed until the doorway. Sophia's fingers twitched. Claire bent close. You are not alone in the hallway. Sophia could not answer, but her breathing settled as if some part of her had heard. When Claire turned back, the 7th stretcher arrived. The paramedics moved slower with this one. Not because the patient was stable, because he was not. The man on the stretcher was in his 40s, maybe early 50s, though. Trauma had a way of stealing age and replacing it with damage. His face was bruised, one eye swollen, nearly shut. Blood marked the bandage around his ribs. His breathing came with a wet drag. His hands were cold and scraped raw fingers curled as if they had been gripping something when the crash hit. The lead paramedic looked exhausted. Male, unknown age. Multiple fractures, chest trauma. Abdominal bruising, airway compromised. Pressure unstable the whole ride. Lost consciousness twice. He had military tags but no wallet. Claire stepped to the bed, then stopped, only for half a second. The man's one open eye shifted under the bruising. It found her, not with recognition exactly, with the shape of a memory trying to rise through blood loss. Claire's face did not change, but Ellis saw the pause. Ransom. She moved again. Airway first. Owen arrived at the other side. We need imaging. Claire checked the man's neck pulse. Weak. Irregular. She looked at his chest rise, the bruising across the abdomen, the way his jaw worked around a failing airway. Air first, she repeated. Owen shook his head. You say that every time like it solves everything. Claire looked at him. Number air solves the first death. Then we deal with the second. The man's oxygen dropped. Respiratory had not returned from CT. Beth swore under her breath. Ellis moved toward the bed, but Emily's monitor alarmed behind him. He turned halfway, trapped between 2 disasters. Claire saw the split. So did he. For 1 second, the entire trauma bay balanced on it. Then Ellis made the call. Claire called the sequence. Owen executes. Owen stiffened. Dr. Ellis. Ellis's voice cut clean. Claire stepped to the head of the bed. Her voice changed. It did not get louder. It lost every unnecessary edge. 2 large-bore IVs blood warmer. Suction on. Bag slow. Beth pressure support ready. Owen low-dose induction. Do not chase perfect. Chase alive. The room moved. Owen prepared the medication. His hands were steadier now, not because he was calm, but because Claire's voice gave him a rail to hold. The man coughed blood into the suction. Claire cleared it. Now she said. Owen pushed the medication slowly. The pressure dipped. Claire's eyes stayed on the monitor. Hold. The room held. The pressure stopped falling. Tube. Owen moved. This time his angle was right. The tube passed clean. Breath sounds came. The oxygen climbed. Not enough to relax. Enough to continue. Claire looked at the IV line. Blood. The red line began moving. The man's pulse strengthened under her fingers. A nurse near the wall whispered, "That is 7. Beth heard it. Everyone did. 7 patients. 7 bodies still refusing to become paperwork. 7 monitors alive under fluorescent light. The trauma bay quieted in layers. The alarms did not stop. The work did not stop. But the panic loosened its grip for a breath. People stood where they were, sweaty and pale hands, red eyes wide, understanding that something impossible had passed through the room and left all 7 patients breathing behind it. Ellis looked at Claire. Her sleeves were stained. A strand of hair had slipped loose against her cheek. Her badge hung crooked from her scrub top. Registered Nurse Residency Program. The words looked almost absurd now. Owen stared at her badge too, then at her hands. "I thought you were new," he said quietly. Claire pulled off one glove. The inside snapped against her wrist. "I am new here." That was when the automatic doors at the end of the hall opened again. No stretcher came through. No paramedic shouted vitals. 2 people in dark suits entered the emergency department with badges already in their hands, walking past security as if the hospital had been expecting them and never told itself. The taller one stopped at the nurse station. His voice was calm. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Every conversation died. Every head turned. The agent's eyes found Claire across the trauma bay. "We need to speak with Claire Ransom." Claire's hand went still over the trash bin. For the first time since the sirens began, Dr. Ellis saw the woman behind the calm look toward the door, like the wound had finally found her. For one breath, the trauma bay forgot how to move. The monitors kept speaking. Blood still moved through tubing. A ventilator sighed beside Caleb Pierce. Somewhere behind a curtain, Liam whispered for his mother. But the people standing under the fluorescent lights had gone quiet in the way crowds go quiet when danger changes uniforms. The taller agent held his badge open long enough for the seal to catch the light. "Special Agent Victor Madsen," he said. "This is Special Agent Leah Ortiz. We need Claire Ransom." Beth Rose stepped out from behind the nurse station with her shoulders squared and her face set. "You can need all you want," she said. "This is an active emergency department." Agent Ortiz did not look at Beth first. She looked at the room, at the blood on the floor, at the 7 occupied trauma spaces, at Claire's sleeves, at Dr. Ellis, whose gloves were still wet with someone else's life. Then she looked at Claire. "We are aware." Dr. Ellis moved between the agents and the trauma bay before he seemed to decide to do it. His body simply placed itself there. "She just kept 7 people alive," he said. "If this is about a patient, you wait. If this is about anything else, you still wait." Madsen's expression barely changed. "Doctor, this has already waited 9 years." Claire stood near the trash bin, one glove still on one glove removed. Her uncovered hand rested against the edge of the counter. It did not tremble, but the stillness had changed. Earlier, her stillness had been focus. Now it looked like containment. Beth glanced at her. "Claire." Claire did not answer right away. Agent Ortiz lifted a tablet. Its screen glowed pale under the hospital lights. "We are not placing her under arrest," Ortiz said. "But we need to speak privately." "Then speak here," Ellis said. Madsen looked at the patients. No. Ellis's jaw tightened. That was not a request. Claire finally moved. She dropped the second glove into the trash and wiped her hands once on a towel. It did nothing for the blood at her cuffs. "I'll go." Beth turned sharply. "No, you will not go alone." Claire looked at her then, and for a small second the hard edge between them softened. Not into friendship, not yet. Into recognition. Beth had spent the last hour fighting to keep the floor from breaking. Claire knew that kind of person. People like Beth did not scare easily because they had seen too much to waste fear on shadows. Claire said, "I won't be long." Ellis stepped closer. "I'm coming." Agent Madsen's eyes moved to him. "Doctor, this is a federal matter." Ellis did not blink. "She is my nurse in my hospital, and she is walking out of a trauma bay covered in blood because you decided now was convenient. I'm coming." Ortiz's gaze flicked to Claire as if waiting for her to object. Claire said nothing. Madsen folded his badge closed. Fine. They moved through the corridor with the strange rhythm of people pretending not to escort someone. Nurses watched from doorways. A unit clerk stopped mid-call and let the phone hang loose against her cheek. A family member looked up from a chair, saw the agents, saw Claire, and pulled her coat tighter around herself. The hospital had many kinds of silence. This one was new. The consultation room near administration was small carpeted and too soft for the conversation it was about to hold. A round table sat beneath a low light. 3 chairs, a box of tissues, a framed print of a mountain lake on the wall, blue water and bright sky, as if grief could be managed with scenery. Claire sat without being asked. Ellis remained standing beside the door. Madsen took the chair across from her. Ortiz stayed on her feet, tablet in hand. For the record, Madsen said this conversation is voluntary. Claire looked at the closed door. Voluntary rooms don't usually come with federal badges and one exit. Ortiz's mouth tightened, but Madsen gave the smallest nod. Fair. Claire leaned back, not relaxed, ready. "Why are you here?" Ortiz placed the tablet on the table and turned it toward her. The screen showed a trauma log. Timestamps. Interventions. Notes entered under different staff accounts. The language was clinical clean, stripped of panic. Needle decompression. Massive transfusion activation. Cardiac resuscitation. Pelvic stabilization. Controlled airway management. Seizure intervention. Hemodynamic preservation during intubation. Claire read it once. Then she looked up. "You pulled hospital records fast." Ortiz tapped the screen. "We did not pull them first. Your name hit a federal alert first." The records followed. Ellis frowned. "What does that mean?" Madsen kept his eyes on Claire. "It means Claire Ransom should not exist in that trauma log." Claire's face did not move. Ortiz swiped. The trauma log vanished. A classified file appeared beneath black redaction bars and a red status stamp. Operation Nightglass Echo Surgical Detachment 9. Status: lost personnel presumed killed in action. At the bottom of the page was a grainy photograph. A woman in desert camouflage kneeling beside a wounded man under canvas, her face turned away from the camera. The posture was unmistakable. Shoulders squared. Left hand on the casualty. Right hand reaching for a medical kit. Ellis looked from the photo to Claire. The blood drained from his expression slowly, not from fear, but from a surgeon's mind rearranging what it knew. "You were military." Claire kept her gaze on the file. "I was attached to people who ran out of hospitals." Ortiz's voice was sharper than Madsen. "You were part of Echo Surgical Detachment 9. Claire said nothing. "You were declared dead 9 years ago." Claire's eyes lifted. On paper, Madsen studied her. Most people consider that a meaningful distinction. Most people have the luxury. Ellis stepped closer to the table. "Wait. Declared dead by who?" Ortiz looked at him now. "Department of Defense channels. Classified casualty reporting. Locked after action review." "That is impossible," Ellis said. Claire's voice was quiet. "No, it's paperwork." The room seemed to shrink around the word. Madsen leaned forward, hands folded. When your name was entered this morning, the system flagged it against a sealed record. That record should have stayed sealed. Instead, 7 civilian trauma interventions matched field protocols described in classified night class reports. Claire gave a humorless breath through her nose. So I saved them too specifically. Ortiz did not soften. You saved them like someone trained to work under fire with no backup, no imaging, no operating room, and no permission. Claire's gaze sharpened. People were dying. We know. Then you understand the order of importance. Madsen sat very still. Ms. Ransom, you performed with training that does not match your civilian history. We ran your license. It is valid. We ran your nursing school. Valid. Employment records valid. But before that there is a gap. Ortiz swiped again. A timeline appeared. Claire's life broke cleanly in the middle. Before the break, ordinary records. School, address, family, credit, employment. Then nothing. 5 years of absence followed by the careful reappearance of a woman with a new certification path and a quiet address in Colorado. Ortiz said no taxes, no medical visits, no leases, no credit activity, no documented travel, no digital trace that behaves like a living person. Claire looked at the blank stretch. Dead women are tidy on paper. Ellis turned toward her. Claire. She did not look at him. Madsen's voice lowered. Who helped you disappear? The question sat between them like a blade placed flat on a table. Claire's fingers rested against the chair arm. Still. Controlled. The same people who made sure we needed to. Ortiz leaned in. Who? Claire finally looked at her. If you knew how to ask that question, you would not ask it here. Ortiz's eyes narrowed. That sounds like a threat. No, Claire said. It sounds like experience. Ellis ran one hand over his mouth and looked toward the closed door as if the hospital beyond it could return the morning to something he understood. What was Operation Night Glass? Madsen did not answer. Claire did. It was supposed to be an extraction. Madsen's gaze snapped back to her. Ortiz went still. Claire looked at the tablet, but the room had vanished behind her eyes. The air smelled different in memory. Dust, burned wire, hot metal, blood too old to be useful. A canvas wall snapping in desert wind. Someone screaming for a medic in a language she only understood by tone. We were sent to pull wounded assets from a compound in Helmand, Claire said. That was the order. Get in, stabilize, get out. Ellis listened without moving. Claire's voice stayed even, but the steadiness had weight now. When we got there, the wounded were not the only ones inside. There were witnesses, translators, drivers, 2 children. People who had seen Root's name's cargo things they were never supposed to see. Ortiz's face shifted by a fraction. What cargo? Claire looked at her. Not medicine. Madsen's jaw tightened. Claire continued. Command told us to take the assigned assets and leave the rest. Ellis's expression hardened. And you didn't. Claire looked at him for the first time since the file opened. Number. The word was small. It filled the room. We loaded everyone we could carry, Claire said. Some walked, some did not. We treated people in the dust until the sky turned white. We called for extraction. Extraction changed coordinates, then changed again, then stopped answering. Ortiz's eyes dropped to the tablet. Madsen said nothing. Claire's voice quieted. After that, Echo 9 was gone. Ellis swallowed. You mean killed? Claire's face did not change. I mean removed. The vent above them hummed. Somewhere beyond the walls, an announcement called for environmental services to the 4th floor. The hospital kept pretending the world was normal. Madsen spoke carefully. Who ordered the removal? Claire's mouth tightened. You already have a name in your head? Ortiz looked up. Silas Grange. Claire's fingers curled once against the chair arm. There it was. Not fear, recognition. Madsen saw it. You know him. Claire's eyes stayed on Ortiz. He knows everybody eventually. Ellis said, Who is Silas Grange? No one answered at first. Then Madsen said Internal Oversight Special Compartmented Authority. He was connected to night class after the operation went dark. Claire gave a short, empty laugh. Connected. That is a clean word. Ortiz stepped closer. Is he the reason you disappeared? Claire looked towards the door. No, he is the reason disappearing felt safer than living. Before anyone could respond, the door opened without a knock. Beth stood there, face hard and pale. Administration wants her. Ellis turned. Absolutely not. Beth's eyes flicked to the agents, then to Claire. They already know the FBI is here. Legal is in a conference room. Clinical operations, too. They are using words like liability and exposure. Claire stood. Ellis shook his head. You do not have to go in there. Claire smoothed her scrub top, though the blood at the cuffs made the gesture useless. Yes, I do. Madsen rose. We are not finished. Claire looked at him. No one ever is. The administration conference room sat far enough from the ER that the sound changed. Less machinery, more carpet, less blood, more air conditioning. The people waiting inside had clean hands. The director of clinical operations, Marlene Voss, sat at the head of the table in a gray blazer. Legal counsel. A narrow man named Peter Lang had a laptop open in front of him. HR sat beside him with a folder, eyes damp with stress. Two men Claire did not recognize stood near the window. They looked too still. Claire noticed them before anyone introduced them. Marlene gestured to a chair. Ms. Ransom, thank you for coming. Claire remained standing for 1 second longer than necessary. Who are they? Marlene's smile tightened. Consultants. Claire looked at the men again. Number. The room stilled. Peter Lang adjusted his glasses. Excuse me. They are not hospital consultants. One of the men near the window smiled with only part of his mouth. Sharp eye. Ellis entered behind Claire. She is not answering questions from unidentified men in suits. Lang's posture stiffened. Dr. Ellis, this is an employment matter. Ellis's voice went cold. It became a patient care matter when 7 people lived because she did not wait for this room to approve oxygen. Beth slipped in after him and closed the door. Marlene took a breath. We are grateful for the outcomes this morning. Claire sat. The room relaxed, slightly mistaking posture for compliance. Marlene continued. But we need to understand what happened. There are scope of practice concerns, authorization concerns, documentation concerns. Claire looked at the blood still marking her sleeve. You had 7 critical patients and 1 trauma surgeon. Lang said that does not erase professional boundaries. No, Claire said. But boundaries do not ventilate a patient. HR shifted uncomfortably. One of the unidentified men moved closer to the table. Your skill set is unusual, Miss Ransom. Claire looked at him. So is Dr. Ellis's. His is credentialed. Mine saved your patients. The room went quiet. Marlene's voice softened, as if softness could make the question less ugly. Are you a danger to this facility? Ellis's hand tightened against the back of a chair. Claire held Marlene's gaze. Today, I was the opposite. Lang closed the laptop slowly. Federal agents entering our ER creates risk. Media attention will create more. If your background exposes this hospital to a security event, we may have to place you on administrative leave pending review. Beth spoke before Claire could. Let me make sure I understand. Everyone looked at her. Beth stood near the door, arms folded, still wearing the controlled fury of the trauma bay. You want to remove the person who kept my floor from becoming a morgue because the paperwork is uncomfortable. Marlene's face hardened. Beth stepped forward. No. She crossed lines. I saw it. I hated half of it. But every line she crossed had a patient dying on the other side. Claire looked at Beth. Beth did not look back. She kept her eyes on Marlene. You want review. You want documentation, I will give you every second. But do not sit in clean chairs and pretend this morning was saved by policy. The word struck harder because Beth was not sentimental. She had fought Claire from the start. Everyone in the room could feel the cost of her defense. One of the men near the window checked his phone. Claire saw the tiny movement. His thumb hovered over the screen. His eyes changed. Not surprise. Recognition. He left without excusing himself. Claire watched the door close behind him. Madsen and Ortiz were waiting in the hallway when the meeting broke apart 10 minutes later. They had been joined by 2 new agents. One was older, broad-faced, with close-cut gray hair and a calm that felt heavier than rank. The other was younger, a black woman with sharp eyes and a tablet held flat against her side. She scanned the hallway, the ceiling camera, the exits the way Claire did. The older man introduced himself. Agent Russell Dane. The woman nodded once. Naomi Vega. Madsen's jaw had tightened since Claire last saw him. Dane looked at her for a long moment. Operation Nightglass was not supposed to reach civilian systems. Claire's voice stayed flat. It reached me first. Vega's eyes flicked with something like respect. The alert did not only come to us, she said. Claire looked at her. Who else? Dane's pause was enough. Claire exhaled slowly. That is the worst answer. Ellis, standing at her shoulder, said, "What does that mean?" Dane looked toward the ER where hospital life continued behind glass and distance. It means Ms. Ransom's name rang through systems older than our office. Some of those systems do not answer to us, Beth muttered. That is supposed to make us feel better. No, Vega said. It is supposed to make you listen. A low tone rolled through the hallway. It was not loud. Not an alarm most patients would understand. It pulsed once then again somewhere beneath the normal hospital noise. Claire's body reacted before anyone spoke. Her shoulders settled. Her breathing slowed. Her eyes sharpened. Ellis noticed. What is that? Vega touched 2 fingers to an earpiece. Then her face went still. Security breach? North parking structure, level 2. Badge failure at service access. Camera looped for at least 40 seconds. Beth's face lost color. Camera looped. Claire was already moving. Dane stepped into her path. Stay here. Claire looked at him. If they came through parking, they are not here to ask questions. Madsen said, We do not know who they are. Claire's voice cut clean. Yes, you do. You just do not know which name they are using today. She walked past him. No one stopped her. At the nurse station, Claire took the radio from its charging cradle. A nurse stared at her, but did not protest. Claire pressed the button. All collision patients moved to controlled access wings. Quietly. No elevators without security. Keep family members with staff. No one stands alone in hallways. Lock records access. Clear north service corridors. Beth reached for her own radio a second later. You heard her. Move with transport. ICU takes 2, step down takes 1. Trauma 3 stays until Ellis clears him. Do not run. Do not scare families. If anyone asks, security precaution. The floor obeyed Beth's voice, but Claire's words had given it shape. Ellis stood beside Claire watching staff move beds, IV poles, ventilators, mothers, sons, strangers with frightened eyes. The hospital became a field of motion, but not panic. That mattered. You have done this before, he said quietly. Claire looked down the hall toward the north corridor. Yes. No explanation. No apology. A nurse rushed toward them from ICU. Dr. Ellis. He turned. The unidentified male from the last ambulance is awake. Claire's head shifted slightly. Thomas Vale, the nurse said, reading from a temporary chart. That is the name we found on his tags. He is asking for Claire Ransom. The hallway seemed to pull tight around that sentence. Dane looked at Claire. How would he know your name? Claire's face was unreadable. He wouldn't. Vega's hand moved near her jacket. Ellis looked between them. Unless. Claire was already walking. The ICU corridor smelled colder than the ER. Filtered air. Plastic tubing. Alcohol wipes. Fear held behind closed doors. Security stood at the intersection. Nurses moved quickly but carefully. Families whispered because whispers felt safer. Thomas Vale lay in a glass front room with an oxygen line under his nose and bandages covering half his chest. Bruising had swollen one eye nearly shut. His remaining eye tracked Claire the moment she entered. The monitor beside him beat steady enough to mock how close he had come to being gone. His cracked lips moved. "Doctor." Ellis looked at Claire. Claire stopped at the foot of the bed. "Do not call me that." Thomas tried to smile. Pain stopped him halfway. "Didn't think I'd see you breathing again." Dane stepped inside. "How do you know her?" Thomas's eye drifted toward him, then back to Claire. "She kept us alive in Helmand when Command forgot we had bodies." Claire moved to his bedside and checked the IV line. Her hand was careful, almost gentle. "You should not talk. You always said that before something went bad. Then listen this time." Thomas swallowed. His voice dropped to a rasp. Clock started. Claire's fingers paused on the IV tubing. Vega heard it. "What clock?" Thomas's eye stayed on Claire. "Night glass." The low security tone pulsed again through the hallway. This time it was faster. A shout came from somewhere near records, then a hard sound. A body against a wall, maybe a cart overturned, maybe both. Then silence. Claire turned toward the door. Dane raised his hand. "Stay in the room." Claire looked at Thomas. His breathing had quickened. He knew. So did she. Claire stepped into the corridor. At the far end, beyond the intersection near secure records, a man in a dark coat stood under the fluorescent lights. He had no weapon in his hands, no badge displayed, no hurry. He looked at Claire with the calm of someone arriving exactly where he intended to be. His smile was small. "Claire Ransom," he said. The old name sounded wrong in his mouth. Dane moved beside her. "Identify yourself." The man lifted a leather credential case. Dane looked at it. His posture changed. Not relaxed. Worse. Constrained. Ellis saw it and went cold. "Who is he?" Claire did not take her eyes off the man. "Silas Grange." Grange smiled wider, almost warmly. "You were always fast." Claire's voice was quiet. "You were always late when it mattered." Grange's gaze moved over her scrubs, the blood at her cuffs, the badge clipped to her chest. "Registered nurse," he said. "That is almost beautiful." Dane's voice hardened. "Mr. Grange, this is a secured hospital area." Grange looked at him with polite disappointment. "Agent Dane, if this area were secured, I would not be standing in it." Vega had her hand near her weapon now. Madsen and Ortiz appeared at the far end of the hall, moving fast but controlled. Ellis stepped closer to Claire. "You know this man." Claire's answer came without hesitation. "He buried us." Grange's expression softened, as if she had wounded him. "I preserved you. You erased us. I kept you alive." Claire's eyes were cold. "You kept the truth quiet." A monitor alarmed inside Thomas Vale's room. A nurse rushed in. Thomas coughed, tried to speak, then grimaced hard enough to turn gray. Claire's head turned toward the sound. Grange's voice followed her low and precise. "Don't?" The word entered the hallway like a command from years ago. Claire froze for the smallest part of a second. Then she moved into the room. Thomas's pressure had dropped. His oxygen slipped. The nurse was trying to adjust the line while watching the monitor hands shaking too badly. Claire took the bag valve mask from the wall. "Ellis." He was already beside her. "Pressure is falling," he said. "Bleed or air. Chest." Claire looked at the bandage, the tube, the rhythm of Thomas's breathing. Tube kink. The nurse looked. I checked. Claire's fingers found the line under the sheet, followed it to the turn near the bed rail, and lifted it free from where it had pinched under Thomas's hip. Air moved. The monitor softened its scream. Thomas sucked in a better breath. Ellis stared at the tubing, then at Claire. She did not look at him. Reposition. Secure it higher. Keep him warm. The nurse nodded quickly, color returning to her face. Claire stepped back into the hall. Grange was watching her. There was pride in his eyes and ownership beneath it. "See," he said softly, "you never stopped." Claire walked toward him until Dane shifted ready to block her. She stopped before he had to. "I stopped being yours." For the first time, Grange's smile thinned. "You think this place can protect you." Claire looked around the corridor. At Beth directing transport. At Owen pushing Liam's bed with a nurse beside him. At Ellis standing with blood on his coat and fury in his eyes. At the families watching from doorways, frightened but seeing everything. "No," Claire said. I think this place has witnesses. That answer reached him. Not deeply. Enough. Grange closed his credential case. You should have stayed dead. Claire held his gaze. I was busy. Outside, the hospital sirens began to rise. Real ones now. Layered and heavy. Local police, federal response. Vehicles converging from streets slick with sleet. Grange looked past Claire toward the sound. Then, back at her. We could still make this clean. Claire's voice was steady. It was never clean. Grange studied her a moment longer, as if weighing whether she was still the woman he remembered or something more troublesome. Then he turned and walked toward the intersection. Vega moved. Dane raised a hand, stopping her for one fatal second of authority and uncertainty. Grange disappeared into the motion of security staff and arriving officers as if the hospital had opened a seam just for him. Ellis swore under his breath. Dane spoke into his radio. Lock north exits, sweep parking, watch service corridors. Vega's voice was flat. He is already gone. Claire stood in the corridor listening to the building tighten around them. Behind her, Thomas Vale breathed through the line she had cleared. Ahead of her, the records wing door hung open. Beth came to Claire's side, face pale but steady. Families are asking why the hospital is locked down. Claire watched the empty hallway where Grange had been. Tell them there was a security threat. Beth waited. Claire turned toward the trauma floor. And tell them their people are still alive. Claire watched the empty corridor where Silas Grange had vanished, and for a moment, Mercy Ridge held its breath around her. The hospital was not silent. It could never be silent. A ventilator sighed from Thomas Vale's room. Somewhere past the ICU doors, a child cried with the full anger of being alive. Radios cracked against belts. Nurses called room numbers. Wheels clicked over tile. But beneath all of that, something had shifted into a lower register. The building knew it had been entered, not visited. Entered. Beth Rowe stood beside Claire with one hand still wrapped around her radio. The knuckles had gone white. She had seen violent patients, grieving husbands, drunk men, swinging at staff mothers, collapsing in hallways, surgeons shouting over blood loss, and administrators hiding behind language. But the man in the dark coat had been something else. He had walked through the hospital as if walls were suggestions. Beth looked toward the records wing. Security says one guard is down. Breathing. Head injury. No weapon found. Claire's eyes stayed on the hallway. He did not come to shoot his way in. Beth swallowed. Then why did he come? Claire turned toward Thomas Vale's room. Through the glass, the man's chest rose under bandages. A nurse secured his tubing higher, hand steadier now because Claire had already found the danger. To remind me who knows my name. Dr. Ellis stepped up beside them, his face pale with anger. He had washed his hands once, but blood remained along the cuticles trapped in the lines where skin met nail. He looked like a man who had spent his morning fighting death and had just learned death sometimes arrived with credentials. He walked out, Ellis said. Agent Russell Dane stood near the intersection speaking into his radio with clipped restraint. When he finished, Ellis turned on him. He walked out of my hospital. Dane looked back at him. He exited through an authorized service corridor. Authorized by who? Dane did not answer. Ellis stepped closer. Do not stand in front of me wearing a badge and pretend silence is not an answer. Agent Naomi Vega moved between them by a few inches, not blocking, just changing the temperature. Doctor, we are securing the facility. Ellis looked past her toward the corridor. You let him walk away. Vega's jaw tightened. He had clearance that caused local security to hesitate. Beth gave a short, bitter laugh. Clearance. That is what we call it when nobody wants to admit they got scared. Dane's eyes shifted to Claire. He came for you. Claire did not deny it. Madsen and Ortiz entered from the far end of the corridor. Madsen's suit was rumpled now. Ortiz had one sleeve rolled up from helping a nurse lift a fallen cart out of a doorway. The clean federal image from the trauma bay had cracked. They looked less like visitors and more like people finally standing inside the mess they had studied from paper. Madsen looked at Dane. North service exit. Gone, Dane said. Parking structure. Clear. Records. Vega answered. Access attempted. No download confirmed yet. Claire's head turned. Yet. Vega looked at her. We do not know what he touched. Claire's eyes moved toward the secure records door. Then assume he touched what mattered. Ortiz stepped closer. What mattered? Claire looked through the ICU glass at Thomas. Names. The word went through the group quietly, but everyone felt it. Dane lowered his voice. The rest of Echo 9. Claire said nothing. Madsen took one slow breath. Are they alive? Claire's eyes did not leave Thomas. Some. Ortiz's expression changed before she could hide it. How many? Claire turned toward her. Enough. Dane spoke carefully. If Grange got a name list, he can move faster than we can. Claire's mouth tightened. He always could. Ellis looked at Claire. Then tell them the names. She finally faced him. Number. Ellis blinked not from offense, but from disbelief. Claire. No. Madsen's tone hardened. If they are in danger, withholding information puts them at risk. Claire stepped toward him. You think names make people safe because names let you open files. Grange taught half the people who write those files. He knows where paper goes before ink dries. Ortiz crossed her arms. Then what do you suggest? Claire looked down the corridor where staff were still moving patients into controlled wings. She watched Owen Klein pushing Liam's bed with another nurse beside him. Liam's mother walked next to the rail, both hands pressed against her son's fingers as if she were afraid the bed might vanish if she let go. Owen spoke to her softly, explaining each turn, each pause, each monitor sound. He was not performing now. He was present. Claire watched him place his hand on Liam's shoulder when the boy flinched. A small correction had become a real one. We keep this hospital alive first, Claire said. Dane's eyes narrowed. The hospital is secure. No, Beth said. The hospital is contained. Different thing. Claire looked at her. Beth met her eyes and lifted the radio. Tell me where you need people. That was not surrender. Beth Rowe did not surrender. It was trust under protest, the only kind that meant anything. Claire pointed down the hall. No patient from the crash stays in a room with a public doorway. No family member moves alone. Security watches stairwells, not just elevators. Anyone asking for records gets a human escort and a second person watching the escort. Vega nodded once, already relaying instructions into her earpiece. Claire continued. Lock the staff locker rooms. Beth frowned. Why? Because people trust uniforms hanging on hooks. Beth's expression changed. She pressed her radio. Charge to security. Lock staff locker rooms and restrict scrub access. Any missing badge gets reported now. Ellis looked at Claire, and the question in his eyes was not suspicion anymore. It was grief. Grief for the fact that she knew these things. A sound cut through the corridor, not the security tone. A patient alarm. Sharp, fast, wrong. It came from the step-down wing where Jack Moreno, the first patient from the crash, had been transferred minutes earlier. A nurse shouted room 12, oxygen dropping. Claire moved before anyone gave permission. Ellis moved with her. Madsen reached as if to stop them, then lowered his hand when Beth's glare found him. Do not, Beth said. Claire entered room 12 and saw the problem before the sentence finished forming in the nurse's mouth. Jack Moreno lay pale against the sheets, eyes open, chest, fighting the tube that had saved him earlier. The chest drain line curved under the bed rail at a bad angle. The collection chamber sat too high after transport. The rhythm on the monitor had climbed into panic. His wife stood near the wall with both hands over her mouth. I just stepped in, she said. He looked at me, then the machine started screaming. The nurse at the bedside was trying to trace lines, but too many tubes crossed in the same space. Ellis reached for the dressing. Could be tube displacement. Claire was already at the drain. Kink first. She lifted the line and felt the pressure release under her fingers. A dark rush moved through the tubing. Jack dragged in a breath that seemed to hurt all the way down. His oxygen rose by 2 points. Not enough. Claire looked at the chest, the skin around the tube site, the tremor in the man's jaw. Ellis. I see it. Owen appeared in the doorway, breathless. "What do you need?" Claire looked at him. He did not look scared of her this time. He looked ready to be useful. Gloves, suction. Keep his wife where he can see her but not where she can fall. Owen nodded and turned to the wife. "Ma'am, I need you right here. He can hear you. Say his name." Slowly. She stared at him frozen. Owen softened his voice. "Say his name like you are calling him home." Her lips trembled. "Jack." The man's eyes shifted toward her. "Jack, I'm here." Claire adjusted the line while Ellis inspected the chest tube site. Beth entered with supplies. Vega stayed outside the door, watching the hall and the patient, at the same time learning the hospital's strange geometry. Jack's oxygen climbed again. The alarm slowed. Ellis secured the tubing higher. Claire checked the chamber, then the dressing, then the monitor trend. Owen stood beside Jack's wife, one hand hovering near her elbow in case her knees failed. She kept speaking. "Jack, you stay with me. You hear me, you stay." Jack's gaze remained on her. Claire stepped back. "Good," she said. Owen looked at her. For a second he seemed to be waiting for criticism. Claire gave him none. "You kept her useful," she said. He swallowed. "I almost told her to leave." "I know. That would have been wrong." "Yes." He nodded, accepting the correction without flinching. Jack's wife looked at Claire with tears shining under the harsh room light. "You are the nurse from the trauma room." Claire turned toward the supply cart. "One of them." "No," the woman said. "You are the one he kept looking at. Like if you were calm, he could be calm." Claire did not answer. The woman's voice broke. "Thank you." Claire's hand paused on the cart handle. She looked at Jack, then at his wife. He did the hard part. The woman shook her head. No, he had help. Claire held her gaze for one breath, then turned towards the door. In the hall, Madsen waited. "That was a complication," he said. Claire walked past him. "That was a patient." Madsen followed. "You understand what Grange just did." "I understand what he has always done. He walked in because he wanted you to see that he still can." Claire stopped near the nurse's station. "Then he wasted the trip." Ortiz came up beside Madsen. "No, he did not. He confirmed you are still reactive to patients. That is leverage." Beth looked over sharply. Claire's face stayed controlled, but Ortiz had touched a nerve. Ellis noticed. "You are saying he would use patients to move her." Ortiz did not soften the answer. "Yes," Beth muttered, "God." Claire looked toward the crash patient's rooms. "He already has." The words settled. Madsen lowered his voice. "Protective custody." "No, you have not heard the terms." "I heard the cage." Ortiz stepped closer. "You're exposed." Claire faced her. "I have been exposed since the first stretcher came in." Dane approached from the records corridor, phone in hand. "We need to move her out of Mercy Ridge." Ellis spoke before Claire could. "No." Dane looked at him. "Doctor." Ellis's voice was low and dangerous. "Do not doctor me like that makes me ornamental. You brought ghosts into my hospital and then lost the man who held the door open. You do not get to take the person holding my patients together and call it protection." Dane's eyes hardened. "If she stays, the threat stays." Beth stepped beside Ellis. "If she leaves, the threat follows, and we still have 7 critical patients." Vega looked at Claire. "You know he comes again." Claire nodded. "Yes." Madsen said, "Then why stay?" Claire's eyes moved across the corridor. Liam's mother sitting beside his bed, lips moving in prayer, or counting, maybe both. Emily Ward's brother at a glass door, face wet, hand pressed flat to the window because he could not touch her yet. Jack's wife still calling him back by name. Nurses who had watched Claire cross lines and now watched doors. Beth with a radio like a weapon. Ellis with fury barely contained. Owen learning how not to freeze. Claire looked back at Madsen. "Because he came here." Dane frowned. "That is exactly why you should leave." "No," Claire said. "That is why I should not let him decide what this place becomes." No one answered quickly. A hospital director could have turned that into a statement. A politician could have turned it into a speech. Claire did neither. She said it like she had said airway first blood now, stay here. A fact. Beth's radio crackled. Charge, we have media at the front entrance. 2 vans. Security is holding them outside. Beth closed her eyes. Of course we do. Marlene Voss, the director of clinical operations, appeared at the far end of the hall with legal counsel Peter Lang beside her. They looked less polished than before. Marlene's blazer was buttoned wrong. Lang had lost his clean confidence and gained a thin sheen of sweat. Marlene stopped when she saw the agents clustered around Claire. What happened? Beth's laugh had no humor. Which part? Lang looked toward the windows. The media is asking about a nurse who saved multiple patients during a mass casualty event. Someone leaked the FBI presence. We need a unified response. Ellis stared at him. A unified response. Lang heard the danger in the repetition and chose softer ground. We need to prevent misinformation. Claire looked at him. Then do not lie. Marlene's gaze flicked to the agents. What can we say? Dane answered. Security incident, no active threat confirmed. Patient care ongoing. Beth said. That sounds like a shrug in a suit. Marlene rubbed her forehead. Then Liam's mother stepped out of the nearby room. She was a small woman, with a coat still damp from the storm and eyes swollen from crying. She had clearly heard enough to understand very little, which made her more frightened. Not less. Are they talking about her? She asked. Everyone turned. Claire did not move. The woman pointed at Claire with trembling fingers. The nurse. Marlene softened her voice. Ma'am, please return to your son's room. No. Beth straightened, surprised. Liam's mother looked at the agents, then at the hospital administrators, then at Claire. My son told me she kept him awake. He said he asked if he was going to die, and she did not lie to him. Claire looked down. The woman continued, voice shaking harder now. People keep moving around like something is wrong with her. Something is not wrong with her. My boy is breathing because she stayed when he was scared. Lang opened his mouth. Ma'am, no one is suggesting. The woman cut him off. I am suggesting something. I am suggesting you stop whispering about her like she is trouble when every room in this hallway has somebody alive because of her. The hall went quiet in a different way. This was not federal silence, not fear. It was the kind of silence that forms when truth arrives without permission. Emily Ward's brother stepped out next. He was still wearing a winter hat forgotten on his head. His eyes were red. My sister is in surgery because she made it there. They said the blood came fast because someone called it before the numbers showed. Jack Moreno's wife appeared at room 12. My husband asked for her with his eyes before he could breathe. One by one, families gathered at doorways. Not many, enough. Beth looked at Marlene. There is your unified response. Marlene's face shifted through conflict. Legal fear. Public fear. Human recognition. The last one took longer, but it arrived. She looked at Claire. Miss Ransom, I need to speak with you. Claire said, then speak. Privately. No, Beth said. Marlene inhaled, then nodded. Fine, here, Lang whispered Marlene. She ignored him. The director stood in the hallway of her own hospital, surrounded by federal agents, exhausted nurses, frightened families, and the woman everyone had tried to classify in one way or another. We are not placing you on administrative leave at this time. Lang closed his eyes. Marlene continued before he could stop her. We are opening an immediate internal review. Dr. Ellis and charge nurse Rowe will document the medical necessity of each intervention. Until the review is complete, you remain assigned to trauma support under direct physician oversight. Beth's mouth twitched. That is what she was assigned to this morning. Marlene looked at Beth. Then we formalize what actually happened. Claire watched her carefully. What does that mean? Marlene's voice steadied. Temporary trauma response coordinator. Special cases. Mass casualty preparedness. Protocol review. Training support. No independent physician acts. No unsupervised medication orders. Clear structure. Clear record. Lang looked like he might faint. Ellis said, under my service. Beth said, And my floor. Marlene nodded. Yes. Claire stared at the corridor floor for 1 second. White tile. Gray grout. A tiny smear of blood missed by a quick mop. Power always came wrapped in language. So did traps. What do you want in return? Claire asked. Marlene looked tired enough to tell the truth. I want my hospital functioning. I want my patients alive. I want the media outside to hear that Mercy Ridge responded to a crisis with skill and coordination. And I want to know whether federal agents are going to keep walking into my building. Everyone looked at Dane. Dane did not promise what he could not control. We are increasing protection around the facility. Beth muttered, wonderful. More men with radios explaining less. Claire looked at Marlene. Staying visible puts the hospital at risk. Marlene's hands folded and unfolded once. Yes. Removing me puts patients at risk. Marlene looked toward the families. Yes. Claire nodded slowly. Then I stay. Madsen stepped forward. Claire. She looked at him. No protective custody. Ortiz said, You are making a tactical mistake. Claire's voice stayed even. No, I am refusing an old one. Dane studied her. What do you want from us? That question seemed to surprise everyone, including Dane. Claire answered without hesitation. Secure the hospital without owning it. Watch the doors without blocking care. If you find Grange, do not assume credentials mean control. If you touch the names connected to Nightglass, you tell me before paper moves. Dane's eyes hardened. That last part is not how federal investigations work. Claire stepped closer. It is how survival works. Vega looked at Dane. She is not wrong about the paper trail. Dane did not like that, but he did not dismiss it. Madsen said, We can create a restricted channel. Claire said, with who controlling access? Me, Madsen replied. Claire studied him. Ortiz's eyebrows rose slightly as if she had not expected him to offer himself that quickly. Claire looked at Ortiz and her. Ortiz held her gaze. Why me? Because you say the ugly part out loud. A thin silence followed. Then Ortiz nodded once. Fair. The agreement did not make the hallway safe. It only gave danger a shape people could work around. Marlene turned toward the families. We are going to keep caring for your loved ones. Our staff will update you as soon as possible. Please stay with the assigned nurses and follow security instructions. It was not a great speech. It was good enough. Families returned to rooms reluctantly. The hallway loosened by degrees. The hospital did not relax. It resumed. That was the closest thing to peace Mercy Ridge had available. Claire stepped away from the group and walked toward the emergency department. Ellis followed. So did Beth, slower, giving her a few feet of space that felt deliberate. The trauma bay had been cleaned but not restored. Cleaning could erase blood from tile. It could not erase what the room remembered. A mop bucket sat near the wall. Empty packaging filled a trash bin. The crash cart was sealed again, but with a new red tab. The monitor in Trauma 3 was dark now. Its patient moved to ICU. Trauma 1 smelled of bleach over blood, over fear. Claire stood in the doorway. For the first time that morning, there was nothing in her hands. Ellis stopped beside her. I should ask you 1,000 questions. Claire looked at the bed. Yes. I'm not sure I want the answers in my hospital. That is usually where answers get messy. He gave a tired breath that was almost a laugh, and not close enough to become one. I meant what I said. I do not know who you were. Claire looked at him. Ellis continued, But I know what I saw today. The overhead lights hummed. Claire waited. I saw a nurse keep patients alive, he said. I saw a soldier too, maybe. I saw someone who knew how to command a room without asking for rank. I do not know what name belongs to all of that. Claire's eyes moved to her badge. Claire Ransom. Registered Nurse, Residency Program. It is the name on the badge. Ellis looked at it. Is it real? Claire touched the edge of the plastic. Real enough to answer to. That is not what I asked. No, she said, it is what I can give you. Ellis accepted that with a small nod. Not because it satisfied him, because he understood triage. Some wounds waited. Beth stepped into the bay. You two planning to brood in my trauma room all afternoon. Ellis looked at her. Your trauma room? Beth walked past him and checked the seal on the crash cart. Until administration grows a spine, yes. Claire almost smiled. Beth saw it and pointed at her. Do not get comfortable. Claire's mouth settled. I wasn't. Good. Beth opened a drawer, counted 2 packs, closed it. Because I still think you are a liability. Ellis sighed. Beth. Claire said, she is not wrong. Beth looked at her. Claire continued, I am. Beth's expression tightened. That was not an invitation to agree with me. Claire stood straighter. Beth looked toward the hall where Liam had been wheeled out. Her face softened only slightly. That boy asked for you after transport. Claire did not answer. His mother thinks you walk on water. She is tired. She is grateful. Claire's eyes stayed on the trauma bed. Beth watched her for a long moment. You do not take thanks well. I take vitals better. Beth gave a short exhale. Cute. It was not meant to be. I know. That is what makes it almost funny. Ellis looked between them and said nothing, which was wise. Owen appeared at the door, hesitant. He had changed gloves and washed his face, but a streak of dried blood remained near his collar. He looked older than he had that morning. Dr. Ellis, he said. Ellis turned. Status. Sophia is in CT. Neuro is reviewing. Emily is in OR. Pressure is better than expected. Liam is stable in step-down with blood running. Jack's oxygen is holding after the drain adjustment. Hank is in ICU. Caleb is ventilated and stable. Thomas Vale is awake, angry, and trying to talk. Beth said, so he is a patient. Owen nodded, then looked at Claire. I owe you an apology. Claire did not rescue him from saying it. Owen stepped farther into the room. I thought your confidence was ego. Claire waited. It was not. She looked at him. Sometimes it is. That startled him. Claire continued. Confidence can get people killed if it stops listening. Owen swallowed. I stopped listening. Yes. He took the hit. Did not dodge it. Good. I looked at your badge, he said. Not the patient, not your hands. Your badge. Claire said, do not do that again. I won't. With anyone. Owen nodded. Beth leaned against the counter. That sounded almost like professional development. Owen gave a weak smile. Claire looked toward the airway cart. You adjusted on the second intubation. Owen blinked. That mattered, Claire said. The words reached him more deeply than praise would have. Thank you, he said. Claire nodded once. A voice came over the hospital speaker, calm and artificial. Security notice. Mercy Ridge remains under controlled access. Please follow staff instructions. The message repeated. Beth rolled her eyes. Controlled access. Sounds clean enough to eat off. Ellis turned to Claire. Is Grange coming back? Claire looked toward the ambulance bay doors. No. The certainty made everyone still. Beth asked no. Claire said, not today. Owen's face tightened. How do you know? Claire looked at him. He came to see if I could still be moved by bleeding. Ellis's voice lowered, and Claire's eyes stayed on the glass doors. I can. No one spoke. That was the truth they all had to work with. Claire turned away from the doors. But now he knows other people move too. Beth lifted her radio slightly. Damn right. Madsen entered the trauma bay with Ortiz behind him. They paused at the threshold as if understanding that this room had earned more respect than the conference rooms. Madsen looked at Claire. Dane has a perimeter team staying through the night. Ortiz and I are setting a restricted contact channel. No broad database queries on night glass without our approval. Claire looked at Ortiz. Ortiz said I did not say trust us. I said the ugly parts out loud. Claire nodded. Madsen held out a small card with a number written by hand. No switchboard, no office line. This rings me. Claire took it. Beth said, does it come with agents who know how to stay out of the way? Ortiz answered, no promises. Beth looked at her for a beat. I almost like you. Ortiz's mouth twitched. Try not to. Madsen looked at Ellis. We need Thomas Vale's formal statement when medically appropriate. Ellis's answer was immediate. When medically appropriate means when I say, Madsen nodded. Understood. Claire looked at the card in her hand. Grange had access. Madsen's face darkened. We know. No, Claire said. You know he walked in. Access means more than doors. Ortiz watched her carefully. Files. People, Claire said. Assignments. Transfers. Security shifts. Media leaks. Patient movement. If he wants a person, he does not always take the person. Sometimes he moves the room around them until the person walks where he needs. Beth's grip tightened around the radio. Madsen looked at Ortiz. She was already typing. Ellis said, "Then we change how the room moves." Claire looked at him. He did not flinch from it. The afternoon settled into a strained rhythm. Patients moved from crisis into the long danger after crisis. Families received updates that left them crying with relief and fear at the same time. Nurses restocked the trauma rooms with hands that shook only when no one watched. Security stood at stairwells and entrances looking more awake than usual. Federal agents spoke quietly in corners and learned to step aside when stretchers passed. The media remained outside their cameras, pointed at the hospital doors. Marlene gave a statement near the front entrance. Claire did not watch it live, but Beth played part of it on a phone at the nurses' station while pretending she did not care. Marlene stood under the awning with sleet melting behind her. Mercy Ridge Trauma Center responded this morning to a serious multi-patient emergency. Our physicians, nurses, paramedics, and support staff worked as one team under extraordinary pressure. We are grateful that all 7 critical patients remain away and receiving care. Out of respect for patient privacy and an ongoing security review, we have no further details at this time. A reporter shouted, "Is it true a first-year nurse saved them?" Marlene paused. Beth leaned closer to the phone. On screen, Marlene looked toward the hospital doors, then back at the cameras. "It is true that one of our nurses performed with exceptional courage and skill as part of a larger trauma team." Beth snorted, cowardly but usable. Claire did not look up from the supply list she was checking. Beth lowered the phone. "They did not say your name." "Good. They will find it." "I know." Beth waited. "You scared?" Claire looked at the shelves, counting pressure bags. "Yes." Beth did not expect the answer. Claire placed another bag on the cart. "Fear is information." Beth studied her. "And what is it telling you?" Claire looked toward the ambulance entrance. "To keep working." Beth nodded slowly. Near evening, Ellis found Claire outside Thomas Vale's ICU room. Thomas was sleeping now, sedated enough to stop trying to drag the past into every breath. His monitor held steady. His chart sat thick with new notes, new orders, new complications waiting their turn. Claire stood with one hand against the glass. Ellis stopped beside her. "He is stable. For now." "You say that a lot." "It is usually true." Ellis looked through the glass. "He called you Doc." Claire's mouth tightened. "They all did." "Were you?" "No. But they called you that. In places without doctors, people give names to whoever stops the bleeding." Ellis considered that. "Did you ever want to be one?" Claire glanced at him. "A doctor." "Yes." Her eyes returned to Thomas. "There were years when I wanted to be anyone who slept through the night." Ellis accepted the answer without pressing. After a moment, he said, "Temporary coordinator starts now." Claire looked at him. Beth signed off. She wrote 3 pages of objections and signed anyway. That sounds like Beth. She also added that any training program not using your field assessment skills would be negligent. Claire blinked once. That one reached her. Ellis saw it and wisely did not smile. "She still called you a regulatory nightmare." "That also sounds like Beth." He handed her a clean hospital radio. Beth said trauma coordinator carries this. Claire looked at it. "No badge change." "Not yet." She took the radio. The plastic was warm from Ellis's hand. "For the record, he said you answer to me clinically and Beth operationally." Claire clipped the radio to her scrub top beside her badge. "For the record, she said I was already doing that." Ellis almost smiled. "Try not to make me regret this." "I cannot promise that." "I assumed." They stood in silence while Thomas slept behind glass. Then Claire's phone buzzed. Her personal phone. Not the hospital radio, not the number Madsen had given her. She pulled it from her pocket. Unknown number. No caller ID, no preview name. The message was short. Night glass was only the beginning. Claire looked at it. The words did not surprise her. Not really. A second message appeared. 7 lived, now they all count. Ellis watched her face. What is it? Claire turned the screen toward him. His expression hardened. We call Madsen. Claire nodded. But she did not press the number yet. She looked through the ICU glass at Thomas, then down the hallway where Liam's mother had fallen asleep sitting upright in a chair, then toward the elevator where Emily's brother waited for surgical updates with both hands clasped so tightly his fingers had gone pale. Ellis said quietly, Claire. She deleted neither message. She forwarded both to Madsen. Then she placed the phone back in her pocket. Now we call him. Ellis studied her. You kept the messages? Yes. Why? Claire looked at him. Because pretending evidence does not exist is how graves get paperwork. Ellis nodded once. Before he could speak, Beth's voice came over the radio. Trauma team ambulance inbound. Single patient. Fall from height. 5 minutes. The ordinary sound of it moved through the hospital like a hand on a familiar wound. Ellis looked down the hall. You good? Claire listened. To the radio. To the hallway. To the distant elevator chime. To the controlled access announcement repeating somewhere above them. To the wet hiss of tires outside as another ambulance turned into Mercy Ridge. Her hands were tired. Her back ached. Dried blood remained in a thin line beneath one fingernail. Her past had walked into the hospital wearing a dark coat and had not gone far enough away. But the ambulance was coming. A patient was coming. The trauma bay was stocked. The room was ready because she had checked it twice. Claire touched the radio at her chest. I'm here. Ellis nodded. They walked back toward the emergency department together. At the end of the corridor, Beth was already pulling gloves from a box. Owen stood beside the airway cart looking pale but steady. June checked oxygen. Nurses opened drawers. Security stepped back to clear the path. The ambulance doors glowed red through the glass. Claire entered Trauma 2 and looked once at every corner. Suction. Oxygen, monitor, cart, airway, blood tubing, exit. Nothing wrong. Not yet. Beth glanced at her. Room good. Claire tugged on her gloves. The room is good. Beth looked toward the doors as the siren grew louder. Floor. Claire listened to the sound of the hospital around her. Fear, motion, breath, work. The floor is awake. The ambulance doors opened. Cold air rushed in carrying sleet diesel and the sharp metallic promise of another life balanced on the edge. Claire stepped forward.